Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about a subscriber question, and the question in question is, Frederick, should I migrate from Jquery over to vanilla JavaScript? So let's get into it. So this is a very tricky one. It's a very, very hard question to answer, and the reason why it's hard to answer is because I simply don't know how much is already invested into Jquery in the current project. Because now I have said, and I still stand by this, that if you are starting a project from scratch these days, you shouldn't really require Jquery. If you need Jquery, I think that you're either forced to support very old browsers, or you're doing it more because of more due to habits than an actual necessity to it all. But if you already have it, how should you think in those scenarios? Well, I will pull out my favorite tool, which is the cost value analysis, and you have to make an informed decision based on the current state of affairs. If you have, let's say, just used it in a few places, and it's scary how common it is that people use Jquery to do some Ajax, and that's about it. If that is the case, then yes, you should absolutely make a migration, depending, of course, once again, on the extent of it. I'll give you a great example. At the previous job, we had actually used Jquery in quite a few places, and we figured that a switch from Jquery to simply using like the native APIs would be fairly feasible, because we had only really used Jquery for a bit of animations in, maybe a handful of places, and that is work that we can achieve, or we can make that migration in a manner of hours, or at least a day or two, or something of that nature. It's not like we're talking about a complete rewrite of the whole system. However, I've also been in situations where I've had, not specifically Jquery in this scenario, but other tools that I simply cannot get rid of, because the investment in that tool is so massive. This is also why I tell people that that tool that you love so much, it's great if you know it, it's great if you're good at it, but you have to realize that you don't really know when you get a job exactly the full extent of the thing, the state of affairs. It is very, very unlikely that you will never find yourself in a situation where you're working in a company where there isn't some type of legacy in place, which you kind of just have to deal with, because unfortunately you can't just rewrite things, because that would be the easy thing. It would be easy for me to stand here and answer this question by saying, of course you should migrate it. I mean, all of the people on the internet and all the performance promoters and bloggers and all of these people talking about lazy loading, bundle sizes, code splitting, and all that stuff. And I mean, they are right. It's just that is not reality. Reality is that you will find that in certain situations, the investment in an old way of working, or in a certain way of working, regardless of how you feel about it, is simply too great for you to make that switch. And that's where the cost value analysis comes in. And I will argue that is something that we often forget when we look at bloggers and people talk about different best practices, because what they show you is usually the ideal case, a simple case, something that is very feasible to do. The cost value analysis is good, it's beneficial to do this, but in my world, a true professional doesn't just and that's the thing that I think distinguish a senior in many ways, a senior from a junior, because a junior will simply read the blogs and know about the best practices and simply say, hey, we should be doing this because of these reasons, while a senior will take a step back and have a look and see, all right, I know we should be doing this, but is it worth investing that work? Is it worth optimizing this? Because unless you can do it in a feasible amount of time, and with a fairly low risk to the project and like the company itself, you shouldn't do it. And this is me saying it. I am telling you here and now that if you have invested heavily in Jquery, you shouldn't remove it. It's just a risk to your project. If you have any chance of severely damaging your project because of an already existing dependency, you should not just strip it out. You should have a really hard think about whether, like, what the impact of having that dependency actually is, because having jQuery on a page is not the end of the world. Even if you're just using it for a very specific task, there are other things you could do in order to improve things. But what you should have in mind is always that the cost value analysis is the thing that dictates whether or not you should migrate from one thing to another. And that is something, especially in front end, I think people are they are kind of lost on that, because people rewrite things and add new packages left and right, and I kind of feel like it's almost a paradox. On the one side, the conversation is, oh, we should go for high speed, high performance, small bundle sizes, all that stuff. And on the other side, with these same people then turn around and say, hey, I have these 4 new awesome cool packages that are supported by a single person, and they're still in beta, but we can use them because they save me literally 20 seconds of coding. Or let's call it a few minutes, and then they slap that in. So I think it's so funny when I've talked to people who are, and even in my company, people who are talking about performance, and then I take a look at the package JSON file, and they are responsible for damn near half of the dependencies we have. Kind of weird that in one conversation, performance and bundle sizes is really important, and then on the flip side, having arbitrary packages is not really a problem, because it improves the developer experience, right? So what I want you to take away from this is that when you ask the question, should I migrate from jQuery over to regular JavaScript, ask yourself the question and take a look at your code. If you can achieve this migration with fairly low risk and in a reasonable amount of time, you should absolutely do that. But you should not just migrate. This is just general, guys. You shouldn't just migrate from one thing to another thing just because somebody told you that it's better. You have to make an informed decision, because your project is different from everybody else's project. So really think about it, make a cost value analysis, think of the benefits that you're going to get for doing the migration versus the cost of doing that. Do the engineering thing, do your work, really look into it, and then make an informed decision to switch from one over to the other. And as a bonus tip, in order for you to avoid having these sorts of issues where you have to go from one thing to another, really think about when you're adding a dependency, because trust me, it's so much easier to add something than it is to change something that is already there. Therefore, you should always really ask yourself, do I really need this? Will the project make or break depending on this dependency? Because if it's not, if it's just a convenience thing, try to really ask yourself, can I live without this? Because once it's in, it's much harder to get out. Have a great day.